Hi, my name is Mike Beeman, and I'm your F5 dedicated account manager. I've had a few calls with your teams, and I was invited here today to discuss F5's application services for modern application development strategy, and how F5 might be a good fit for you and your current business challenges. So before we get into that conversation, I wanted to ask, are there any specific questions that you'd like to have answered before we walk out of this meeting today? Because what I'd like to do is just annotate those on the whiteboard, and we'll check those off as we answer those questions so we can make sure we get all of your questions answered today. Awesome. Now, typically I start with a 10 to 15 minute whiteboard, giving you a high level overview, and then we'll take the last 45 minutes to get a better understanding of your current business challenges and how F5 might be able to solve those problems for you. Now, originally we had scheduled an hour for this meeting. Is that time still okay? Awesome. Well, let's get started. Let's begin by taking a step back and take a look at legacy software development. Applications were developed leveraging three-tier monolithic architecture that typically had a user interface, a business layer or a business logic layer, and a database layer. Developers embraced waterfall methodologies where multiple development teams would contribute to a single stack of code, which was released usually 2 to 3 times a year. These applications were often running on virtual machines like VMware vSphere or Microsoft Hyper-V, and these workloads were often what I'd like to call locked in. What I mean by locked in is VMs running in VMware as virtual machines. Those VMs could not be run in a Microsoft Hyper-V environment, or the other way around. And basically what we're talking about is vendor lock. Now, our industry has a long history of locking in clients, dating back as far back as the advent of the IBM mainframe. Now, today, data centers are transforming, and we see more and more clients adopting cloud. And we're seeing the same vendor lock story play out again in our industry. So most organizations today are leveraging a hybrid cloud strategy. They're using a mix of public cloud, private cloud. We see this a lot in financial services. And then, software as a service, which is effectively a cloud offering. These vendors offer cloud native services that are proprietary in nature and work to lock clients into those architectures. However, most organizations are looking to run workloads across these disparate architectures, preferring agnostic platforms that enable them to run any application everywhere, which leads us to modern application development today. Most companies are working to break apart their monoliths in favor of microservices running in containers, leveraging DevOps and agile methodologies. Breaking down the monolith into smaller discrete services allows developers and operations team members to work in smaller project squads. They develop and implement code for slices of the original monolith, speeding up their time to market, allowing for faster issue resolution, and by embracing agile development methodologies and a DevOps culture, they're able to break down silos. This tectonic shift in business processes allows these teams to release code weekly, sometimes daily, and in many cases hourly. By moving to containers, organizations are able to realize their vision of running the application or service in any cloud, anywhere, because containers abstract the application or service from the underpinning architecture. Another value of containers is that they're lightweight in nature. They can be instantiated in less than a second through automation to meet peak workload demands, and then be deprovisioned when the demand goes away, reducing a customer's cloud expense. The shift away from monolithic is typically an evolution. Most companies start by breaking off 1 or 2 discrete services from their monolith at a time and move them to containers, eventually refactoring the application to a near 100% microservices architecture. Let me share some interesting percentages with you. 86% of organizations expect microservices to be the default application architecture in the next 5 years. 60% of enterprises have microservices in pilot or in production, citing agility and scalability as top motivators. 80%. 80% of all internet traffic today is application programmable interface traffic, or API traffic. Now you might ask yourself, how does this statistic, this percentage, fit into the overall picture? How does it relate to all this stuff? Well, APIs are the connective tissue that allows containers and microservices to talk to one another. The rise in the use of containers is creating a dilemma. As you break down your monolith into smaller services, you'll find yourself managing orders of magnitude higher numbers of containers versus virtual machines, and therefore an even dramatically higher number of APIs, leading to what we call API sprawl. It's not uncommon for customers to manage tens of thousands, if not millions, and in some cases, trillions of APIs in a fairly dynamic environment, leading to what we call the API management challenge. So what is the API management challenge? Well, we should ask ourselves some fundamental things. First, we should be asking, how do we define APIs once and publish them to many environments? Next, how do we authenticate and authorize APIs, ensuring that only the right people and systems have access? Next, how do we protect APIs from bad actors, doing things like denial of service attacks? Next, how do we deliver a high level of performance for both north-south and east-west traffic without implementing complexity? Next, how do we provide critical insights into this application performance? And lastly, and possibly most important, is how do we provide fair and predictable pricing? So how does F5 solve for these challenges? For API definition and publication, F5 provides a dev portal where you can define APIs once and publish them to many environments in just a few steps. For authentication and authorization, F5 provides our API gateway, ensuring that only the right people have access, the right people and systems have access to your APIs. We also mitigate DDoS risk by the application of rate limiting. And we ensure high levels of performance for processing north-south and east-west traffic, API traffic, by leveraging our highly efficient API gateway that decouples the control plane from the data plane for API traffic, providing dramatically higher levels of performance. F5 also provides visibility with real-time monitoring and alerting to 100 critical metrics. And finally, we provide fair and predictable pricing with our API management offering by only charging you for successful API calls. Did you know, on average, 30% of API calls are bad calls that are never completed, and we don't charge you for those. This can also be important if you're under a DDoS attack. Most of our competition bills you for all API calls, exposing your organization to financial risk from DDoS threats. So far, this meeting has been about F5 and how we add value to modern application development. But I'm curious, did anything that I've talked to you about today so far, or I've highlighted here, has any of this resonated with you or your extended team? Now I'm finished with my overview, and what I'd like to do is spend the next 45 minutes or so discussing your organization's business challenges. Fantastic.